Hello and welcome to the Sky Sports F1 podcast sponsored by Dropbox. I'm Matt Baker, and joining me to celebrate the return of Formula One to our screens this week in Austin, Texas, our man on the ground in the USA, the 2009 Formula One World Champion, Jenson Button joins me. Jenson, how's it going? How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. I'm really good and excited about going racing again. I haven't been to an F1 race for a few races now, so I cannot wait. Austin is always a great one. It's a great city and a circuit that I think most drivers love.
Yeah, they certainly do. I mean, how have you been filling the void of Formula One this last month? We've had this weird autumnal break, I guess we could call it. Autumn for us here in the UK, I guess not in LA. It's always sunny in LA, isn't it? But how have you been? What have you been up to?
Dealing with the heat has been unbelievably hot here, but I'm not gonna whinge about that. But what have I been doing? I've been all over the place, racing in all sorts of different things. So I'm still racing in World Endurance Championship, which has been amazing, lots of fun. We've raced in Brazil, and we've raced in Austin, and then the last race was in Fuji. So I've been busy with that, but also busy with racing historic cars. So I raced my C-Type Jaguar last weekend in Sonoma. So yeah, can't keep away from four wheels.
How do you find the historic cars? How is that different, getting behind the wheel of a car like that compared to, say, your wet car, which is obviously top of, well, the spec on it is modern. How do you find adjusting between the two cars?
I love it.
Do you?
Absolutely love it. I think tech has its place, and it's great that we're pushing the boundaries and the technology in F1 and the technology in WEC, how far it's come from sort of 10 years ago. But I do also love jumping in something that's just you and the machine. Very mechanical. You've got to blip the throttle on the downshift. It's running on drum brakes, so there's not a lot of stopping power. And you're just dancing the whole time with the steering wheel through the corners. So it's really, really good fun. And I've really enjoyed going back to that. It's very tricky when you take away all the gadgets to drive, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, nice. Okay, well, look, we'll turn our attention to Formula One, to obviously cars at the top of their game in terms of tech. We've got tons to discuss. We've got 6 races left of this season. I was preparing to do this chat, Jenson, and my goodness me, the storylines that we've got heading into these final 6 races are unbelievable. There is, obviously, we've got the championship, but then we've got debuts for Liam Lawson. It's so much has changed and moved around since you were last with us. So we'll get into all of that. Let's start though, shall we, with the championship. Here's the state of play, just to remind you, as I say, we've had that break. So we enter Austin with Max Verstappen on 331 points, Lando Norris on 279. That's a 52-point gap to Verstappen. Then Charles Leclerc on 245. That's an 86-point gap. So most people, I guess, would probably say this is a 2-horse race. Lando Norris needs to take on average 8.8 points off Max per race to win the championship. But we have 3 sprint races out of the 6 races that we've got. 50% of these are sprint races, obviously with more points on offer. So, Jenson, my big question to you, can Lando Norris win the World Championship this year? Can he do it?
I mean, I'm going to say yes, because otherwise we're just going to, watch the races until the end of the year and we all know the champion. So, no, yeah, I think he can. And, I've been on the Max side of it, where the car isn't performing as it was earlier in the season. You're having someone who chase you down, and it's tough. Max is a tough cookie. He really is, in terms of, I don't think the pressures really get to him like most drivers. But this is a tricky situation. He's already got it into his head, from what I hear, is that he's not going to win another race this year. So it's basically just, he's in a position where he's just got to come home, bring points. But sometimes when you've put that pressure on yourself, it's even harder to get a podium. And also, it's not just that McLaren are fast and Lando Norris. Oscar's had some great results. Mercedes, obviously, and Ferrari are all there. So if they all get their weekend together and the Red Bull's not singing as it has been earlier in the year, that's a lot of points lost in one race. So it still is up in the air. Yeah, obviously it's Max is in a good position, but it's a high pressure position that he's in, and I think that's exciting. And I think that F1 as a whole is in such a good place right now that we have so many teams fighting for victories. I didn't expect it. I really didn't this year. But I'm pleased to say that, it's great to see 4 teams fighting for wins.
Yeah, if I'd said to you at the start of this year, Jenson, we've got 6 races to go. You can either drive the McLaren or you can drive the Red Bull. Which are you picking in February, and which are you picking now?
Well, now it's easy. It's the McLaren, definitely, hands down. At the start of the year, you would have picked the Red Bull. I remember the testing in Bahrain, and everyone's like, "Oh, look, here comes Max. Half a second quicker than anyone, 7/10 quicker than anyone." And it was every time he jumped in the car, the pace was there, and it just seemed easy. It's amazing how quickly things can turn around when you're so far into a regulation. There's not been any regulation changes. I think I'm amazed that we've seen such a difference throughout the season from teams. And I don't know if that's Red Bull losing their way a little bit, not getting the upgrades that they'd hoped, or going a direction that hasn't worked for the car. You start trying wild things with the car when it's not working, and sometimes it can push you in the wrong direction, and then you start developing the car in that direction. So it's a tricky position to be in for Red Bull, with having 3 teams breathing down their neck and the off-track action that we've had as well. So it's great for the sport, not so good for Red Bull, but there's some very talented people there, including Max, that can build this team back up again. But this year, it's going to be tough until the last race.
It certainly is. When you run the numbers in terms of the championship and what needs to happen, probably we can both agree a DNF for either driver is going to really swing this championship one way or the other. Certainly, perhaps for Lando, could be curtains on the championship, but for Max, it could also obviously have a big impact. I mean, just in terms of the last couple of years and those stats, Verstappen has only failed to finish 1 Grand Prix in his last 59 races. It's unlikely, it's not impossible. And then Norris had a retirement in Austria, but that was obviously due to contact, wasn't it, with Max? When you're in this situation as a driver and you've got 6 races, you're trying to bring it home. You mentioned Max might have the mentality that he's not going to win another race. That must be quite challenging for a driver to adapt and to almost change your mentality to perhaps be a bit more conservative and cautious.
Yeah, it's definitely not Max's style to be cautious. But the issue comes if the car isn't competitive enough in qualifying. Then you've put yourself in a position where it's tricky. For example, Austin. Turn 1 is, you could have 7, 8 cars wide on turn-in, and it all narrows down to sort of 2 cars wide. So if he's in a position where the car isn't quick enough to put it top 2, top 3, then you're in the danger zone of getting damage at turn 1. So that's when we'll see a real turnaround, I think, in the championship. And as soon as you're a little bit more cautious, that's when problems start, because no one else is being cautious, and you've got one car being cautious and all the others around you not. So it really is a minefield. And I think this sport is such a mental game, and it's hurt me in the past, and hurt my performance in the past by not having my head in the right place. And especially when I fought for the championship, it's kind of the same situation for Max. I think he's probably can handle the pressure a bit better than I could back then, but still, it's not an easy position to be in. So
we've just come off the back of this break, a month off. This is unique for Formula One. We have the summer shutdown. We all know that happens every single year. But to have an autumn break, the teams will have still been able to work on their cars over the last month. So the development race has still been on. I'm curious to know, as a driver, how would you have approached this month, particularly if you were Max or Lando in the throngs of a championship battle? You then go, right, we've got a month off. What would you have done?
From a driver's point of view, he's given the team all the information that he needs to. He needs to just get away. The drivers just need to get away. Forget about Formula One for a while. See the family, go on holiday, do crazy stuff. Obviously, you got to keep training. That's a big part of it, and keeping focused in that way. But you need, as it says on the tin, it's a break. You need to get away from the sport, because otherwise it consumes you. And I think that's really important for all the drivers. They know what they're doing. They would have gone away and spent some nice time not thinking about racing cars. Some probably did. Some might have gone racing and other things. But That for me was the key really in the summer break to go and relax and forget about racing. And then you come back fresher, excited about getting back in the car. And that always worked for me.
Or if you're Valtteri Bottas, you go to the Gravel World Championships and compete with professional cyclists. Each to their own. Exactly.
And the problem is at that point, you're doing something that's very competitive. I was doing triathlons my last few years in F1. The thing is, if something goes wrong on track and you're not as competitive, immediately the team looks for a reason, or the media looks for a reason why you're not so competitive. And they'll go, it's because you're racing on a gravel bike. That's why you're not competitive in F1. You're focusing on that more. So that's the only worry from a racing driver. For a racing driver, doing things outside of Formula One is people have something to point the finger and say, that's why you're not competitive that last race, not just because you were slow.
So who then out of Lando and Max will this break have favoured, do you think? Who will have enjoyed the time away and who will have perhaps gone, actually, no, I want to keep going?
Well, I think it's obvious. The guy that's winning wants to keep going. You don't want to stop. You want to keep it rolling. So definitely it would be Lando. Lando would have wanted to just keep going, keep winning. And you keep, because when you're doing that, you're just building the pressure on your competitor. Max, I'm sure, would have liked a little break to take a step back, go, what's going on, guys? How do we get this back on track?
All right, let's move on and talk about team orders. This has become an issue, perhaps since you were with us at Silverstone. And, we've talked about papaya rules. We've talked about there not being a number one driver at McLaren. What have you made around this conversation about team orders at McLaren so far?
I love that there's no team orders, because as a racing driver, you hate them. But at some point, if you want to win a world championship, you need to favour one driver. Especially at this point in the championship where every single point counts right now. For Lando, if he has any opportunity on becoming a world champion in 2024, he needs every single point. And that's even using Oscar to grab the fastest lap if Max has got it in a race. So it's a really tricky situation for a driver, for drivers in a team and for a team. But it's got to happen. That's the reason why Ferrari won so many world championships with Michael Schumacher. In a way, why Vettel was able to win so many world championships. And I think that sometimes you got to bite the bullet, and you need to favor one driver, especially at this point of the season. Yeah, Oscar's done an amazing job this year, but Lando has more points and a good amount more points. So if the team want to win, not just the constructors but the drivers as well this year, that's what's going to have to happen.
When I was doing some research for this, I typed into Google Jenson Button team orders, right? And there was an interview with The Guardian in 2010. This is an interview in Monza, and the headline went, "I would rather quit F1 than follow team orders."
Yeah, totally. And I still would now. I still would now.
Nothing's changed.
No, definitely. I mean, it's the worst thing for a driver. Suddenly you got to give up a position. But, some of it is on you as well, because you obviously didn't do a good enough job at the start of the year that your teammate has more points and he can fight for a world championship. But the only time that I had team orders that I can remember in my career was in 2010 Turkey, where the two Red Bulls crashed into each other. So it was Lewis and myself fighting at the front. Lewis was told that I wasn't going to fight him because he had to save fuel. I wasn't told that information, so I overtook him. He overtook me again. And then the team came on the radio and said, Jenson, hold position. I'm like, okay, all right, done. And then after the race, we had a bit of a ding dong because Lewis thought I was told to not overtake, but I wasn't. So miscommunication. But that was the only time I'd ever been told team orders, and it's a weird one. It really is. But from a team's point of view, it's kind of what has to happen if you want to fight for this world championship.
In that same article, team principal Martin Whitmarsh was quoted saying, "We don't operate team orders." That was obviously McLaren in 2010. It still seems the same way in 2024 that they seem to have this ethos of not operating with team orders. Sitting back now a little bit further away from the sport, having obviously been the passage of time, do you think you can win a world championship, as McLaren are trying to do, without implementing team orders? Or do you think perhaps they've made a mistake in waiting this long in the season? Because we do know that Andrea Stella came out and said that they would start to consider it. So do you think perhaps they've waited a bit too long into the season?
Possibly. I like the way that they go racing, that they let their drivers fight. From a fan of the sport, that's what we all want. It's nice to see that both their drivers get equal opportunities, and that's always been the way. When I was racing with Lewis, we were teammates at McLaren, we won 6 races one year, and between us, 3 each. And if one of us won all those races, they might have won the world championship. So, the McLaren could have won more world championships if they had team orders through the years. But I think the reason why drivers want to race for that team is because they don't have the team orders and they can have equal treatment on either side. So it is a real tricky one. From a fan's point of view, it's lovely they don't have those team orders, and I like that. But if they want to win more world championships, gonna have to start.
You mentioned Oscar's performances there. I mean, he's obviously created in the best possible way a problem for McLaren, hasn't he, this season, with his tremendous performances on track. How impressed have you been with Oscar Piastri this season?
Yeah, his outright speed has always been there, but he's pulling the weekends together a lot better. I think his one lap pace has always been staggering, and up there with Lando. Race pace was not as strong, I would say, last year as Lando's on average. This year he's definitely been more competitive, and I would still say that Lando is more consistent in terms of always pulling out the maximum performance of the car. Some of it's experience. So yeah, it's definitely, I would definitely say Lando has performed better, as you can see by the points. But very impressive of what Oscar has done, taking the challenge to Lando in the same car, and Lando is at the top of his game right now is really impressive. So what a great team they have of drivers, and, 2 guys I think are going to be with that team for many years to come. And I think we should all feel very, very lucky that we're going to get to see that fight at McLaren. Yeah.
Best driver pairing, do you think, on the grid?
I mean, that's
impossible question.
It's impossible. It is, we can all say what we think, but it's very difficult. You really don't know. And in terms of working together, I have to say that Mercedes is really strong. Having Lewis and George, who's been performing extremely well, that is a real strong driver pairing. But people will go, well, what about this driver pairing? What about this driver pairing? Yeah, we're all going to have different opinions, and those are the 2 that stand out, because I know how good Lewis is. I've experienced it many times over and over again. For George to be that competitive up against someone like Lewis, it's extremely impressive.
Right, let's quick look at the Constructors' Championship. McLaren sit on 516, Red Bull on 475. That's a 41-point gap to McLaren. Ferrari on 441. That's a 34-point gap to Red Bull. So, Jenson, when you actually look at that and you go, well, McLaren, they've got Oscar and Lando scoring good points week in, week out. Red Bull seemingly have just Max scoring good points week in, week out. Then Ferrari have Carlos and Charles, who are scoring good points week on week. Red Bull must be looking over their shoulder now at Ferrari going, hold on a minute, we're probably going to finish 3rd, are we, in this Constructors' Championship?
Oh yeah, I can't remember the last time a team, because they have a really good possibility of winning the Drivers' Championship. I can't remember a team ever winning the Drivers and finishing 3rd in the Constructors. I'm sure someone's going to let me know. But that's extreme, right? It shows how good a job Max has done as well in the car. But yeah, I can't see Red Bull beating McLaren right now. I really can't, in terms of, for any race until the end of the season, outscoring them. But I can see Ferrari challenging Red Bull. I don't think it'll be every race that they'll be scoring more points, but there's every possibility that Ferrari will beat Red Bull. There's much more of a chance of Ferrari beating Red Bull than Red Bull beating McLaren.
if we were to put a case forward for Red Bull, perhaps specifically for Max Verstappen, Austin and Mexico, he has an incredible record at both of those tracks. Since they rejoined the calendar after COVID, he's won every single race that's been raced in both Austin and Mexico. It kind of got me thinking, for you, were there tracks that you just instantly fell in love with and knew that every time you went back there, you would find an extra bit of time or you'd find some form, even if the car wasn't as good as in the years before? I mean, which tracks were those for you?
The thing is that I think Max maximizes the car wherever he is. So I don't think it is like that with Max. Some drivers have certain tracks that just work for them. Checo, street circuits. So I think you got to look at what's happened the last few races rather than what happened the last couple of years in Austin and Mexico. How many races has it been since he won a race? Is it 6 races?
8. It's been 8.
8 races.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Spain.
the longest. That's the biggest. Yeah, longest amount of time for years that Max hasn't won a Grand Prix. Probably since he joined Red Bull.
Yeah.
So I think they'd still be worried going to the next 2 races, even though they're strong races for them as a team previously. And that's the thing, it's more what's strong for a team and a car. Whether the car's efficient, whether it's got just loads of downforce, would work on circuits like Monaco. The difference in the turbos that you have with the Ferrari and the Red Bull and how it works. And so there's many different factors that the reasons why teams work at different tracks. I personally feel, yes, they might be closer to the McLaren, but you still got to say it's a McLaren track. For me, circuits that I went to that I always thought I could get a bit more out of the car, I would say Spa. I think every driver would say that though, but Spa definitely, and Melbourne. Melbourne was always early in the year, and I just loved racing in Melbourne and felt that I could always maximize what I had.
3 wins in Melbourne, wasn't it, for you, which I think is the most you had at any track?
Yes, yeah.
Before we continue the podcast, a quick word from our sponsors, Dropbox, because we all know that victories in F1 can be won or lost by the finest of margins, and it's the reason that data plays such a crucial role in a team's success. In fact, over a race weekend, 1.5 terabytes of data is collected per team. That's a lot of data. As a technology partner of the McLaren Formula One team, Dropbox is trusted for its fast, secure and reliable syncing and sharing capabilities, which helps the team quickly search and manage this huge amount of content and data. If you would like to find out more, you can get an exclusive behind-the-scenes look at how Dropbox fuels the McLaren Formula One team's speed and performance by visiting dropbox.com/McLaren F1. And of course, a big thank you to Dropbox for sponsoring this podcast. All right, let's move on. I mentioned that there were tons of other storylines as well in the intro, and there really are. I mean, one place I want to get your thoughts on, Jenson, is what's happened at RB. Daniel Ricciardo out, Liam Lawson in. Firstly, let's reflect on RB's decision to let go of Daniel, and I just wonder if you thought it was the correct decision, if you thought that perhaps the form and whatnot dictated that actually, it was fair enough. And also get your thoughts on how he was let go, because it was quite odd, wasn't it, in Singapore? Wasn't he going to race in Formula One after that? Just what are your reflections on that?
It's a funny one because there's only one team really that brings in drivers mid-season, takes drivers out of the seat mid-season, or 3 races in, 6 races in, and that team is Red Bull and AlphaTauri. So it's unusual, and I've never seen that in my career, unless someone's been putting it in the wall every race, and it's like, you know what, we can't afford to have you in the car. So it's a weird one. I've never felt comfortable with that. Always I feel that a driver deserves a season to really show what he can do, because that's what it is, right? It's a championship, and it's how many points you can score through that season, not just halfway through. But they've always done it a different way. And, to be fair, they've put Daniel in a few races in to a season as well. So it's a tough one. And I think for Daniel, I struggle with the results he's had lately, because he's an exceptional talent. He really is. to jump in the Red Bull when he did and go up against Sebastian Vettel, to go up against Max and be as competitive as he was, it was unbelievable. It really was. And then we saw glimpses of it at Renault as well. Before it was Alpine, we saw it at Renault. Took some time to find his feet, but then he was extremely quick against the Hulk. I mean, we all rate very highly. It just didn't materialize at McLaren and at AlphaTauri, which is such a shame. And why is that? I don't know. It's not his age. He's not old. Look at Fernando Alonso, what he can do. So the only person that knows is probably Daniel. And I feel for him because, to be on such a high for a lot of your career and then it fall away for the last few years, it's tough. But I think he's, from what I've heard, he's made peace with it, and he's got his whole life in front of him. And I know there's so much to do out there after Formula One and fun things for him to do that he wasn't able to do while he was in F1. But it always hurts a bit when it's not your decision to leave. And he'll feel that pain for a little while, but then he'll get over it and it'll be all good. He's such a personality. He's got such a career in front of him, whether it's in racing or TV, stand-up, whatever it is. Daniel will find the route that works for him.
Stand-up, that's a new one. No one suggested he go into stand-up just yet. You think he'd be good?
I mean, he's just naturally silly and funny, so yeah, I think it would work well.
Let's see. I'm sure a venue would be happy to give him a go. All right, so that's Daniel's journey out of RB. Let's look at the story of Liam Lawson coming in, 22 years old. So not only has he never raced in Austin before, it's a sprint weekend. And how difficult is that job going to be for him to jump in the car? I mean, essentially it's 6 races, right, to prove that you deserve a seat, not just at RB, but will he have his eyes on the seat at Red Bull as well?
Yeah, it's not his first time. He's had a couple of races already when obviously Daniel hurt his hand. So he's not jumping into the unknown. I think he'll be unbelievably excited to jump in the car and just to drive an F1 car. It's the most awesome thing ever. Doing it at a sprint weekend, yeah, it's not. You'd rather it wasn't a sprint weekend, but he'll get to grips with it quick. And it's a tricky one for him. He's obviously extremely talented. Red Bull believe in him. But filling Daniel's seat, I think with a lot of fans of the sport, it's tough because Daniel was such a big personality in the sport. But let's not forget that it wasn't Liam's decision to get rid of Daniel, and I think that's what Formula One and fans of Formula One need to remember. You got to jump at the opportunity, and for Liam to have this opportunity, it's a big deal. So he should definitely be supported, and I look forward to seeing how competitive he is. I really, really do. I think he's got the talent, and obviously this sport isn't just about natural ability. It's there's a lot more to it, and the pressures that come with being an F1 driver, not just a reserve or a jump-in driver. It's very different, and we see it a lot with the pressures that come with the media, the team, the manufacturers, and the pressure you put on yourself, the mental side of it. It's tough, and I hope that he can handle that, and we get to see him perform at his best. It's
really exciting, and just, cool to see another driver on the grid, isn't it? Another rookie. All right. A guy called Lito, we put out a post asking for questions, people to get in touch with their questions for you, Jenson. What do you think about Franco Colapinto? I wonder if you know much about him from your relationship with Williams. He's burst onto the scene, scored 4 points in his first 3 races in that car. I mean, that's 4 more points than Logan Sargent scored all season. He's really announced himself, hasn't he, as a competitor in Formula One?
Very, very impressed. I think everyone is. You give someone an opportunity, and you think they're going to take a few races to get to grips with the car, Formula One, the tracks. But no, he's done an extremely good job to jump in and to be pushing Alex as hard as he has. We've not seen that before at Williams. So really, really impressed, and lovely to see his confidence, how he's working with the team, how he's working with Alex. It's a big deal for him. And people have noticed. that's the thing. People have noticed immediately as soon as he's got in the car. People have noticed his pace, how he carries himself, how he brings the car home and doesn't make mistakes. So, he's definitely one for the future. I also loved his first lap in Singapore, to make the ground that he did. Took some big risks, but it paid off. Was really, really impressive. And I like his style of driving. It's very different to the way I used to drive. I was definitely more cautious. He's pushing it to the limit, but it seems to work for him. He's on the edge, it seems, all the time. It's exciting to watch. Impressed. I really do hope that he does have a future in F1. Obviously, he doesn't have a seat at Williams next year because Carlos Sainz is there. But I do feel that he does have a bright future in this sport. I just hope he can deal with being a reserve driver in 2025, because that's also a strange feeling when you've raced in Formula One to take a step back.
Yeah, and performed so well. I mean, have you met him yet? Have you had a chance to say hi and welcome to Williams?
Not since he's been an F1 driver.
Yeah,
and it's a funny one because you race for so many years in different categories, and you're a racing driver. It's great, and then you're announced as an F1 driver, and your world changes. It really does. You go from being a racing driver to an F1 driver, and that's like, it's what you dreamed of. It's your dreams come true, and everything around you changes. So I hope he's enjoying the moment, and I hope, as I said, when it's taken away next year, hopefully he can handle that and still have his head in the right place to race for a team in the future in F1.
Final point then, just while we're on Williams, Carlos Sainz comes in for next year. Talk to us about the strength of that driver lineup. Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz racing for Williams. You've got to hand it to James Vowles, haven't you, for bringing Carlos Sainz to Williams. I mean, that is a real statement of intent for that team. And going into 2025, and obviously the regulation changes in 26, that's a really exciting proposition, isn't it?
It is. And, Carlos comes with so much experience of racing with the best teams in the world in F1. So that definitely helps. You can come in and go, well, actually, this isn't how we would do it. And, this is where they are at this point, and point them in the right direction, because drivers still have a big input of direction of the car and quite a bit, really. So it's definitely helpful having him there because of his speed, because of his intellect, his experience of working with great teams. James Vowles obviously comes from Mercedes, but it's nice to have the experience of McLaren and Ferrari in there as well. He's also Spanish, so it really does help with the following for the team. It helps with sponsors. I think it's an incredibly good lineup. And hats off to James Vowles on achieving that. He's a sweet talker, as we all know. I think in his role at Williams, he's really has been exceptional, and proud to see what he's achieved. I worked with him as a strategist back in 2003, so to see him take the reins at Williams, a team with such history, is very proud of him. So it's great to see what he's doing there, having such a driver lineup, guys that have so much experience in this sport. And I think drivers that will work really well together will really lift this team and help them move forward.
Did you think he'd be a good team principal back in 2003?
No.
Why?
I even when the team announced him, I was like, oh, that's cool. That's really cool. But I don't know behind the scenes. I didn't know how close James was to Toto, and he was basically a mini Toto. He was learning from Toto, and that I didn't know that. So I'm really impressed with him, and I have to say, for me, he's the best team leader in the pit lane. I have to say.
He's always great when we get him on the pit wall and we speak to him throughout the race. He's incredibly informative. So yeah, good for us on Sky Sports F1. Right, just time to tell you about the timings then for this weekend. The US Grand Prix. Wonderful timings for us here in the UK. In the evening, prime time for us. So Friday, 6 p.m. we're on air with FP1. 10 o'clock, sprint qualifying, a session start of 10:30. On Saturday, we're going to build up to the sprint race from 6 p.m. before a lights out of 7 o'clock. Qualifying for the main race starts at 11 p.m, but you can join us to build up from 10. And then Sunday, we're on air from 6:30 in the evening before lights out at 8 p.m. Exciting stuff, Jenson. Off to Austin. When do you get there? What are you most excited about going to Austin this weekend?
I raced in Austin earlier this year in the World Endurance Championship, and it's such a cool city. I mean, if you like barbecue, it's the place to be. If you like live music, it's the place to be. So I really enjoy the atmosphere of Austin. Yeah, it's not in the city, but I kind of think that's cool as well. It's an old school racetrack, and the fan base there is massive. So it's a really good atmosphere. It's been resurfaced, the track. So you'll see these cars running as low as they can. They're going to be super fast through turn 1 to turn 8. That for me is one of the best sections in the world. So if you get a chance to watch an F1 car at its best, you got to go to Austin. You got to watch from turn 1 to turn 8. And I'm going to be there. So it's going to make it even better, guys.
You're going to be at M&M on Saturday night. I hear M&M is playing.
Unfortunately, I've got some work.
Some other plans.
But no, I definitely would love to go. Yeah, that'd be very cool.
Well, I'm sure it's going to be an amazing weekend. Jenson, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to watching across the weekend on Sky Sports F1. We're going to be back next Tuesday as always. Hope you can join us then. Bye for now.